Welcome to Cape Breton Movers and Shakers, where we have conversations with people who are doing positive things here in Cape Breton. I'm Richard Lorway, president of goCapeBreton.com, and I'm talking with David Sawler, a co-founder of Undercurrent Youth Centres in Glace Bay, Sydney, and I guess I understand soon to be New Waterford. Welcome,
Yeah.
David.
Good to be here today.
Good. So I know you're focused on breaking the cycle of poverty and addiction here in the CBRM, and this is a really, serious problem, as I'm sure you're really aware. But a lot of people and organizations have been talking about this for a long time. Can you talk a bit about how you initially became engaged with these causes?
Yeah, I mean, we've been working at Glace Bay for 16 years, and it really, as we started our first youth center, it kind of became evident to us that there was issues, like whether it be in the homes or in the lives of so many people we worked with, and we didn't even feel we could adequately do what we do without taking on, or at least addressing, the addiction and poverty side. Just because we had so many kids, you really couldn't afford anything, like when we think about poverty. But also, we were finding the youth that we were having, maybe a lot of personal issues. It was usually because of addiction issues at home.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So parents are.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
And so we realized it wasn't just a youth issue, it was actually a home issue or a parent issue, it's their family issue. And so you're having we just felt we had a high percentage of kids and youth who the youth center became their safe space because they didn't have it somewhere else. And it became more and more evident that if we were going to succeed in what we're trying to accomplish in our town, we actually had to address that in a much bigger way.
Okay. So can you take me back to those early days when you and your wife moved back here? I understand you grew up here, but you moved back. Is that correct?
Yeah, we were actually living in Oakville, Ontario before coming back, but we visited here every year.
Yeah, it was a very wealthy community by contrast, Oakville, right?
Yeah, it's actually one of the wealthiest cities in Canada. Exactly. And then of course, Glace Bay is kind of the opposite. And so it's definitely moving from extreme to extreme. And actually, where I was working before, moving back to Cape Breton, I remember saying there's nothing we didn't do because of money. It may have been like how many volunteers we had. It was never about money. Right. Where back here, you got to figure out how to pay for everything. It's like just working in two totally different worlds.
Right. So when you initially got a building, is that correct?
Yeah, it was about a year after we moved back. I just got a call one day from it would have been the elders of the former Epworth United Church.
Right.
And said, building. And we've been renting a spot in downtown Glace Bay, while the former Knox Hall, it's now the bowling alley, Town Center Hall in Glace Bay. And they asked me if I wanted to come look at this building. And it was a complete disaster. Like they had the church had closed down, so they were ripping it apart, anything you could sell. And anyways, we took it on with not a lot of people and not a lot of money, but it took us 4 years to get occupancy because we didn't have the money to do all the work. It was all volunteers, people from town and teams from everywhere. And we just worked away till we got it done. So
did you have good support from people like chipping in their time? And
yeah, really, it was too big of a project for us. It only happened because people helped. In all honesty, we couldn't afford to do it at the time, and we didn't have the manpower to do it. And so it really became a community effort. And I'm sure people thought we were nuts at first taking this old building, and because we had no proof that we could actually ever finish it. You know what I mean? We're gonna try it. And it was such a daunting project when you had no money to say, and we didn't really know how much it was going to cost. But in the end, I'm sure hundreds of thousands of dollars and were spent on it, and a lot of grants, and really hundreds of people put in time to make it happen.
That's a great story. So when you first opened your doors, how did the community react?
Well, we've always had youth here. It's been something else. I even remember it was I think 4.5 years ago. We had been working again at the Sydney Center, and I remember working just like mad because we knew we wanted to start soon. And I still remember working all day. We just cleaned up and I stepped out into the lobby and there was actually kids coming in, and I just looked in the windows and there's other people working that night, and the place was filled the first night.
Wow.
And I grew up in Glace Bay, and even when we moved back, every time I talk to people, like, we want to do something for young people, it was always a common thing. Well, there's not much here for youth.
Yeah.
So that's always been a need. And so I feel we've always had community support because it was addressing a need that everyone already said was there. It wasn't a secret that there's not a lot for young people to do in Glace Bay, or that there's a lot of kids struggling. And so I think we always had really good community support because we're meeting a need that's actually quite obvious in our town.
Okay. So you talk about breaking the cycles, of poverty and addiction. What do you mean by that?
Well, for the past, I'll say it this way, for the past 20 years, Glace Bay has been in an opiate crisis. And so, of course, Cottonland comes out in 2006. And you say, okay, well, what's changed in the past 20 years? And so everyone may not know this, but as of March of this year, like the amount of people in opiate recovery programs across Nova Scotia, I think it's about 40% of them are in the CBRM.
Wow.
And but only 10% of the population. We're running about 400 higher per capita. And then so like a community like New Waterford, like the amount of needles that are given out is 400% higher than the average in Nova Scotia. The amount of opiate incidents or deaths per capita, like we have a lower population, you got to think it per capita, is actually 400% higher than the mainland of Nova Scotia. And so in the last 20 years, we have actually not lowered. Like if you look at our present stats of right now, no matter what we've done, well, I think what we've succeeded in, we do a better job of taking care of people in crisis. And of course, I know we can still talk about all of our wait times and all, it is not a perfect system, but we do have, like, the amount of people in care right now in Cape Breton is actually really high. I think as of right now, somewhere between 1,700 people are in opiate recovery programs of some kind just here in Cape Breton.
Right.
And alcohol, and that's just that. But if you think about it, that isn't a great story when we think here we started. We always had an alcohol issue, and just so people know, Cape Breton as of now still has the highest percentage of incidents or hospitalizations, etc., because of alcohol compared to the rest of Nova Scotia. And so here's this, I would say, a situation that no matter what we've done a better job of care, but the amount of people going into addiction has not lowered at all.
Right.
And what hit us is we started looking at, okay, what has worked around the world? Like, is there places who've turned that around? Like, so I feel like our system has been so swamped dealing with the present problem. Like, if you think about it, when I looked at my own town, what's going on in Glace Bay that would change the amount of people that are going to be addicts in 5 years or 10 years?
Right.
And I would say, well, that's almost nothing. Like, what's going on for our kids and youth right now, that our future would look different than the last 20 years.
Right.
So there are parts in the world who've done that. Like I'll use Iceland for an example. 20 years ago, they were very similar to Cape Breton. Like the economy had tanked, addiction. They were having a huge addiction problem with their youth and young adults. In the past decade, they've last 15 years, the drinking rate amongst youth by 90%. 90, not 90. Some drug use from 40%. There's some drugs that were being used by 40% of the youth population that went down to 5.
Right.
And basically their philosophy was quite simple. It's that they would do, like, and it's easy to explain right now because we have COVID. We have, you have this problem that's going on. So you do a circuit breaker event to end it.
Right.
Because just let it stay. It's like things just keep increasing. So their idea was simply this: instead of trying to do everything, it's not that they stopped doing like care for people in need, that they said, we're going to save one generation and teach them to raise a healthy generation.
Right.
And for one generation, they said every child, every youth will not be left behind, that they will have mentors, that they'll be in recreation, that we will give them ways to get high other than drugs.
Right.
We will be sports, activities, recreation, music, whatever it is, but every single child on the entire island and every family was given access to that. And in one generation, it dropped their drug and alcohol use so dramatically. But here in Cape Breton, 20 years later, we have worse numbers.
Yeah.
And here, another island who dropped some numbers by 90%. And so it's always given me this hope, because it's happened, that it's possible. And so their idea was do a circuit breaker event. And it's not a year event. It's like a generation event. It's like for 15, but it's their idea is, let's break the cycle so it just does not go on forever. So we're not always just into harm reduction, but we're actually doing harm prevention.
Right.
And as someone who runs like youth centers, and I was thinking about even this year, you got to, I know 511, I don't know if it's closed or it was closing Clifford Street over on the north side. Like, we have some great groups already in Cape Breton who are tackling this, and we've never received funds for staff or for like large scale funding, anything from any level of government.
No operational funding. That was one of my questions. You don't get operational funding.
And even the CBRM has a policy that they don't fund core funding.
Right.
And so, like, when it's this issue, say for Clifford Street came up, I'm like, I think their whole budget was $30,000 because they have so many volunteers. Like I know Paul Rashford and different police officers help as well. It's so little money, but you can't ask the CBRM to help, because it's actually, someone passed something one time said we don't fund those types of things. I guess I may be worried about everyone asking for money, but in an area that has such high child poverty, that the fact that the groups that we do have that are doing prevention are so limited, it almost doesn't make sense. Like, we say we're trying to tackle child poverty, but the groups who are really breaking kids out of those cycles are they're doing a great job for the few kids that they have the money to work with.
Right.
And I think that's actually one of our biggest struggles here in Cape Breton right now, is that the government has really put all their money into dealing with people who are presently struggling, which they need to do. I'm not like those are real issues, real people. But
it's not
when
an
you
either or situation.
Yeah. But we are not changing our future if that's all we do. We're just saying we've accepted in 5 years, that's what it's still going to be. In 10 years, that's what we're still doing. But our system is so broken, and we do not have enough doctors. We do not have enough hospital staff. This is like our wait times. We get really upset about our wait times, and we can point fingers at a lot of things, but the truth is we have a staff shortage here too.
Yeah.
We can't get people. And so to even think, if we had a couple years, well, this year, for example, the amount of here in Glace Bay, the amount of calls and arrests, whatever incidents, because drugs and alcohol actually went up 25% just in the last year. Yeah. And so we had many years that the needle exchange numbers were actually going up. So I don't even think we've plateaued.
Yeah, I think COVID, of course, is causing more mental health issues, and people are more stressed, so they turn to escape.
Yeah. So to even think that that the numbers aren't going to go up would be a mistake. And I would say it's beyond that. In one of our meetings that I was in, so I'm as of the last 2 years, I've been the co-chair for the Public Advisory Group for Mental Health and Addiction Services for Eastern Zone, and then I'm part of the provincial group as well. But one of the things that has been talked about over and over again is trauma. And then someone sent me this article, and it's really about trauma, saying, if you really think about how do you know that your community's in trouble or about to face a crisis, is that you would look at how many children and youth are presently in trauma-inducing situations. So of course, COVID brings that way up, like the amount of kids in anxiety and stuff. But then the amount of kids living in homes, high poverty, high addiction rates, etc., that I don't know if there's ever been a time in Cape Breton that would have more kids and youth living in trauma-inducing type situations, which is one of the biggest indicators that you're going to have an addiction problem in that generation.
Right.
I think we have a higher percentage right now than we've ever had.
Right.
So for me, it's like, if we do not do some kind of circuit breaker event, we are setting ourselves up for failure in our community. And I know we have all kinds of people trying to take on the child poverty issue and really our economics. But when you have a population, there's a study that's going to be released this month, that we have communities in the CBRM where about over 40% of the adults say that they're currently struggling with addiction. When you have a population, that means 40% of parents, of the kids that we work with struggling.
Right.
Which, and so a place like us, we don't have 40% of our kids aren't coming from those homes because of who we deal with. It may be 60 or 70%.
Okay.
Right. So knowing that if we don't deal with our addiction issues, our economy is always going to struggle a little bit because of it. Like, it so affects it. So when Iceland did what I mentioned, their economy, I know they did there's all kinds of other things. It'd be wrong for me to say it was just one thing, but it was a piece.
Right. Of course. Yeah.
And I think that's what people in Cape Breton who are doing things like us, it's not the only answer, but it is a missing piece. The fact that I can point to my own town where we have 1,600 kids who live below the poverty line in Glace Bay. So I know there's 1,600 kids who don't have access to mentorship or programs, et cetera. New Waterford and Scotchtown, it's 1,100. And so to me, I always think, okay, what can we do on that scale? And when I think about what's going on in New Waterford on that scale for 1,100, well, there's almost nothing going on. And in Glace Bay, like we are just doing a fraction. I think we're doing a good job that we're working with, but it's still a fraction. Yeah. And so that's been my main call, is like, we need to do a circuit breaker event on the scale of the actual problem. And I don't like using percents. Actually, I always talk in numbers. So if someone says, well, Glace Bay, there's 38% kids living in child poverty, so let's do something for 10 kids. No, I'm saying, you know what, there's actually 1,600 kids. What are we going to do for 1,600? And then it makes start thinking on the scale of your actual numbers.
So, and part of your strategy is to, as you mentioned, to have a safe space, right? So what kind of programs do you offer in those spaces?
So we do actually a range of programming, and some of them, I don't think the youth know that they're programs, but we do some things that is just to give kids something to do. So
Boredom is the enemy, right?
So a lot of it is just for kids who maybe can't afford to go anywhere else. They don't have money to go something. So like we have, I'm going to forget some things. I'm doing this off the top of my head, but like skateboarding, skate school, family skate, scootering, floor hockey, basketball, rock climbing, and then like those types of recreation type sports year round. And in the summers, we do all kinds of camping. I've been kayaking at least 10, 12 times this week, mountain climbing, just or in the last summer, I mean. And so just taking youth getting them outside of the CBRM. But during the year,
giving them experiences that they'll remember. And
100%. And really with youth, so much of it is actually just building memories. Like it's those things that are impactful. And then we have a different level of programming that's what I would call half life skills, because it's getting them involved with mental. So whether it be like our music and art type programs, their kids are actually doing something, but it's actually intentional on our part because there's a discussion going on, or it's an art project around an idea, etc. So there's those types of programming. And then we also, we don't promote these programs that I'm about to talk about. We run a series of life skills programs, and it's for kids that are referred. Okay. And so that's like, for example, this past year for the older group, really started the year off talking about, okay, what is it that you would like, if there was no barriers, what would you want to do with your life? And then the next month it was like, okay, how do I identify what those barriers are? And then spent a lot of the year talking about, okay, how can you overcome those things? And then a part of the year too is just basic, okay, what's the things that are helping you overcome the anxiety and stresses that you're facing at home? And if someone came up with an idea, so the kids in one sense developed a program. So I know a couple of kids in that program said like just being outside and doing something. And
Yeah.
so over the next month, whether they realize it or not, we said, okay, we're going to go do this. And it was an activity, something like they talked about, or, when I listen to music is something. So then we got them involved with some music lessons and also bringing some people in to do some music with them. And then letting them as a group experience some of the things that they say actually help them. And so we run those types of programs. And also through community services, we have usually 6 to 10 youth who are doing job placements with us. So called YDI grants. And so part of it is that we're giving kids their first work experience as well. So that's always going on. And of course, COVID has made all of those things more challenging because usually
Yes.
a year and a half, everything was open programs, like just drop in whenever you want. Didn't matter how many kids or youth were there. So this year that was all broken up into much smaller groups to keep it manageable and COVID friendly. So
You're right. Safe. Right.
Yeah.
So your first center was in Glace Bay and you opened one in Sydney, but I understand Sydney is going on hiatus and you're shifting priorities. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, years ago, we said we wanted to do something in New Waterford. And so this just happened about a month ago. Now we've known about stuff for a while, but wasn't out there publicly. So an announcement was made as part of the complex that's getting built in New Waterford. Of course, the new health park and school
Right.
that's is a community center is also being added onto that. So it was just a month, before the election, they did the announcement in New Waterford. And so they also announced that Undercurrent was going to be part of this new center. So
Excellent.
DBRM and us and the community groups will be able to use the space as well. But it was an $8 million addition to what was already being done. And there's already a community gym that's being built, not the school gym. There's actually another community gym. And so there's going to be this complex added on. And the province is paying for that.
Wow.
And so we only have so many volunteers and so many staff. We actually have a few staff and a lot of volunteers. And this opportunity came up in New Waterford, and we really felt we should be there for a few reasons. One, outside of our First Nation communities, New Waterford has the highest child poverty. It actually does have the highest addiction rates, and it seemed to have the fewest resources for youth.
Right.
And so a lot of people, when you start a business, you're trying to figure where's the best place to start, where's going to make the most money or whatever. But because of what we do, we were thinking, okay, where's the biggest need?
Where can we have the most impact? Yeah.
Where's it the worst in some ways? And so we're like, well, it's New Waterford. So we really felt, okay, if we have limited resources, what should we do? And how this came together faster than we thought. And in the meantime, that building the construction starting this fall, and it'll be 2 years before that's done. But in the meantime, someone from New Waterford owns, it's the former Calvin United Church Hall, and has offered to let us use it for the next 2 years till we move into the new center.
Excellent.
And the building's incredible. And we did get some funding to start a youth innovative lab there. So the whole top floor has, I think there's 7 rooms that surround the gym. And so one's going to be like an art room, coding, music, videography. And it's a great, great spot. And then of course, in 2 years, it'll move into this new location. But it's a great opportunity for us because we've always had to take care of the buildings and fund them, where this is actually a provincial building that we're just using the space in the future. So it's such a relief for us because we can just move in. All we have to worry about is programming and staff. Like half of what we have to worry about now in New Waterford, like we don't have to worry about. And so we've been Undercurrent Youth Centre since we started. And this has been the main shift. We really felt we needed to really push more for the circuit breaker event type thing. And so we realized we need to think more families than youth to what we're doing for kids. And then how are we helping parents with their kids? So it's a big change in programming is where we felt we need to go. And the truth is, like, the complex in New Waterford is a community gym plus 8,000 square feet. And here in Glace Bay, we have about 7,000 or 8,000 square feet, but we're trying to build a bigger center here. And we realized to do this circuit breaker event, our space in Sydney actually isn't adequate because we were sharing space. We had a building that New Dawn helped us get, but we were sharing it with, other organizations.
Right.
And to do what we're talking about doing in Glace Bay and New Waterford, we actually need a much different type of space in Sydney. So that's what I hope is the end game for Sydney as well.
Eventually.
So
yeah.
We're taking on a building project in Glace Bay and this new thing in New Waterford. I think we're going to be swamped.
Yeah.
So there's only but actually not a big group. And so taking on something that's way bigger than us. And so even New Waterford, we got to build a volunteer base up, which I think New Waterford, that's not going to be a problem, but everything takes time.
Everything takes time. Absolutely. So that's an interesting segue into my question, which is what we're asking people kind of, if you knowing what you know now, if you had one piece of advice for somebody or an organization who was trying to move the needle in some way in the nonprofit world, what would it be?
I think in Cape Breton, I feel like one of the best things we can do is not be just focused on our present problem, but what does it look like to change our future? And
Right.
I think that there's real practical things that we can do to change the future and make Cape Breton a better place. And I think that's what the truth is. That's what nonprofits do the best. And I love all our nonprofits in Cape Breton. And I got this from, I remember it was actually Rankin who told me this years ago. And it's a piece of advice I picked up. It's like, the best thing we can do is find someone who's doing something really good and then just give them the resources to do it better. And
Right.
what I love when I think about the nonprofits in Cape Breton, we have some of the best people here. Like, we have great people doing great things, and they're all just a little bit under-resourced. And so
Right.
resource problem. But like, when I think about what do we need to change our island and improve our island, I just think the people are here. Like, we have great people doing great things and are just a little bit under-resourced. But anyways, keep it up. I guess that's I said too many. You said one thing, but I say don't give up, because
That's fine.
it
It's a path. It's a path.
Yeah. I do think it takes a level of perseverance here, because what we do when we started, like 16 years in, I can sit down and talk to different levels of government and different politicians and talk about our needs and the community. And it's easy to do. People know what you're doing, but it took a decade to get to that point.
Right.
And, and I think the perseverance side, it's so needed here, because you can get so disappointed. Well, how come the government's not giving us this or that? And so you give up. And it's like, well, you got to push through. At some point, it gets easier. It's not easy. It gets easier. So
well, good. Well, that's a little ray of hope. Well, listen, thanks so much for your time today, David.
Yep.
I've been speaking with David Sawler of Undercurrent Youth Centers in the Cape Breton Regional Municipality. We'll see you next time on Cape Breton Movers and Shakers.
All right. See you later. Thanks.
See you later, Dave. Thanks.